First on BBC One, the 9 o'clock news with John Humphreys.
Princess Margaret's had part of her lung removed. She's comfortable in hospital. The homeless man who was told the National Health Service was not for him. Senator Kennedy meets the black South Africans who've been told their land isn't theirs. 1,200 more miners end their strike, say the coal board. And man and machine are reunited after 40 years. Good evening. Princess Margaret is tonight recovering in a London hospital after an operation to remove a small part of her left lung. It was taken for analysis, but according to a hospital statement today, it was found to be innocent. Our science correspondent says that because the princess complained of chest pains and other symptoms, her doctors clearly suspected lung cancer. He says yesterday's operation has probably dispelled that fear, and the princess is expected to leave hospital within the week. The Queen is said to be very pleased at the outcome, and Lord Snowdon said today, "I'm very relieved everything went all right, and that it was not something serious."
The 54-year-old princess has never enjoyed the same good health as her sister, and although the operation was carried out at the Brompton Hospital yesterday, news of it was only released at lunchtime today.
Her Royal Highness Princess Margaret underwent an operation at Brompton Hospital yesterday. This was to remove a small area of her left lung, which proved to be innocent. Her condition is satisfactory, and it is hoped that she will go home within the week.
The statement was signed by the surgeon who performed the operation, Matthias Panoth, an acknowledged expert on bronchial tumours. News of the operation spread quickly, though it still came as something of a surprise, since the early indications were that the princess was in hospital for a thorough examination rather than for surgery. Yet she's never been blessed with consistently good health. She's suffered frequently from bronchial trouble, and she's been a heavy smoker for most of her life.
It's a theatrical prop for her. She enjoys the cigarette holder and picking things out and lighting the cigarette herself. It's something that she does. It's a habit with her, but it's also part of her persona. And it's going to be very difficult for her to give it up because it is one of her last pleasures. If she now goes back to renouncing drink, there's very little else for her to do. She doesn't eat very much. She picks at food, and it is her main joy in life.
Tonight, the message from all sides is that there's no cause for serious concern, and several things seem to confirm that. First, the Queen and the Queen Mother are both at Sandringham. They're keeping in touch with the hospital and with the Princess, but they have no plans to come here. And secondly, the hospital authorities say that Princess Margaret should be home by the weekend. However, what we don't yet know is what impact this operation will have on the lifestyle of the Queen's younger sister.
Doctors at a hospital in Oxford have stopped giving treatment to a man suffering from a kidney disease, even though he can't live without it. According to his own GP, the hospital withdrew the treatment because the quality of his life is too low. Now the man, Derek Sage, who's 44, is seriously ill, even though he's having treatment at a private charity hospital.
Since last March, Derek Sage has been having regular treatment on a kidney machine here at the Churchill Hospital in Oxford. Last week, the hospital decided to stop treating him. They believe the quality of his life is not good enough to warrant further treatment. His own GP is appalled at what has happened.
It's obvious that the treatment has been stopped for non-medical reasons.
If he is not treated, what will happen to him?
He will die soon.
What, a matter of weeks or?
I would imagine a matter of days to weeks.
So in other words, by refusing him treatment, the hospital is in effect condemning him to death?
Yes.
What's your opinion of that?
I'm shocked.
Derek Sage lives here at a hostel for the homeless in Oxford. According to the director, he is well loved and cared for.
We accept that Derek was a difficult patient, but I don't believe that this is a justification for, in fact, terminating his life, which is what they've effectively attempted to do.
In the last few days, Derek's condition has deteriorated. But today, the British Kidney Patient Association has come to his rescue. They will pay £300 a week for him to have treatment here at a private clinic in North London. The association too feels the doctors at the Churchill Hospital had no right to refuse treatment on social grounds. The health authority with responsibility for the Churchill Hospital is due to issue a statement tomorrow.
160 children in Bristol are being sent to a private clinic for ear, nose and throat operations because NHS hospitals cannot cope with the demand. The NHS are still paying at £400 a time. The children would have had to wait a year for their operations otherwise. After the birth of baby Cotton, Britain's first commercial surrogate baby, the government have confirmed they want legislation to limit such exploitation. The baby girl is still in hospital in London. The Coal Board say more miners went back to work today than at any time since the middle of November. According to their figures, a total of over 1,200 returned. It was highest in the northeast with 363, in Yorkshire nearly 250, but in South Wales only 5 more men went back. Michael Eaton for the Coal Board said he was disappointed at the union's refusal to move any ground on negotiations. That meant the board had to rely on people returning to work. But Arthur Scargill said if the Coal Board had been expecting a massive return to work, then clearly it was a disaster for them. In the northeast, today's new starters mean 1 in 6 of the area's miners are back. 29 returned together at Bates Pit after a working miner advertised in a local paper. Throughout the northeast coalfield, working miners frequently outnumbered the pickets. South Wales miners picketed every pit in their area after rumours of a big return to work, but there was no sign of it. The Coal Board say 141 South Wales miners are working, that's less than 1 in 100. The union says even that figure is too high.
In Yorkshire, though they'd no chance of stopping miners going into work, pickets stood for 2 hours in the freezing cold just to shout insults. That's how tough it's proving for the Coal Board as it seeks a breakthrough in the heartland of the strike. So far, the return to work in Yorkshire has been slow, patchy and unconvincing. The coal strike's almost been reduced to a numbers game, a sort of industrial bingo. The Coal Board's never said what size return to work constitutes a surge and what figure amounts to a flop. But nothing that's happened today has turned the course of the strike, though the union hopes it has brought nearer the negotiated settlement both sides say they want.
Our members are intelligent enough to know very well that if they want to get talks going, and we do want to get them going as a union, the best way to get them going is to stand together and get the board back to the negotiating table where the settlement will take place. It'll not take place on a return to work or at blackmailing, encouraging or whatever you want to call it, our members to break faith with union. That will not do it.
The NUM admits even the activists are fed up with the strike, but that's not the same as them going back down the pits on any terms or in defiance of the NUM. So no joy for the board there, or from the fact that working miners outnumbered pickets at some Yorkshire pits today, weakening the argument that the strike's still only being maintained by violence and intimidation on the picket line.
The Lancashire NUM has passed a vote of confidence in their General Secretary Sid Vincent, who'd been criticised for taking a foreign holiday during the strike. Mr. Vincent went to Tenerife. Today his union executive said he'd been the target of character assassination, and they were considering legal action against some newspapers. At Derby Crown Court, 10 men, all but one of them miners at Shirebrook Colliery, have been jailed for arson. As Grant Mansfield reports, they'd set fire to 5 Coal Board buses.
This arson attack signalled a new phase in the miners' dispute. For a few weeks during the summer, some strikers abandoned picketing in favour of vandalism. 5 Coal Board buses were destroyed because they were being specially equipped to carry working miners to Shirebrook Colliery in Derbyshire. Most of the culprits were striking miners from the same pit. Today, Judge Brian Woods jailed 9 men for 2.5 years and a 10th for 3 years. Miners, he said, were entitled to disagree with the Coal Board, but not to take action of this sort.
Well, when I first heard, I really felt physically sick, at the severity of the sentences. I suppose looking back on reflection now, both our legal advisors and the men concerned were aware that they may have to serve a custodial sentence, but not of the length imposed on them today.
The Derbyshire NUM has refused to condemn this attack and is adamant that the punishments imposed today far outweigh any crime. It's deeply mistrustful of the courts, but will probably return to them anyway to mount an appeal against the jail sentences.
Engineers have today been into the Summit Tunnel carrying the rail line between Yorkshire and Greater Manchester to siphon off fuel left in the tankers of the train that caught fire nearly 3 weeks ago. The fire burned for days and hundreds of people were evacuated from their homes as a safety precaution. Firemen couldn't get to the seat of the blaze then and poured foam down ventilation shafts. But now their own cameraman has been into the tunnel and his pictures show what's left after the flames and explosions. In spite of the intense heat, the Victorian brickwork of the tunnel came out of it in fairly good shape, but British Rail say it could be 3 months before the tunnel is cleared and ready to be reopened. The world's most powerful foreign ministers from Moscow and Washington met in Geneva today and talked for nearly 7 hours. It's not known whether they got anywhere in their search for a way to slow down the nuclear arms race, but the Americans are still going ahead with research into Star Wars weapons.
It was at the sprawling Soviet compound here that the last arms talks came to an end 13 months ago. Suitably enough, today's first round started off here. Mr. Schultz arrived at the residence. Once it was the Lithuanian mission before being swallowed up by the Russians. It was to be a fresh start. And Mr. Schultz, in coming here, was ending the months of silence and political cold shouldering between the superpowers. Mr. Gromyko and the Soviet leadership have shown they want a new start. And side by side, slightly awkwardly, the two men sat waiting for the cameraman to leave and the talking to begin. There was no question it would be difficult, with Mr. Gromyko insisting that US weapons in space be outlawed, and the American delegates, some of them anyway, saying they were non-negotiable. As the talks dragged on, a couple of Buddhist monks outside chanted a mantra for peace. Perhaps they could claim it worked. The mood inside the Soviet compound certainly improved by the hour. Later, it was Mr. Gromyko's turn to call on the Americans. Here, perhaps a deal took shape, with the Americans maybe using an agreement to halt the testing of their anti-satellite weapons as a bargaining counter. But no details emerged. The fact that no one's saying anything to the assembled journalists is the best possible sign that so far at least things have been going well. If the two sides started saying things in public, they could give away too much, or else get involved in spite of everything in a slanging match with each other. That way the chances of an agreement would vanish altogether. Tonight, with the formal meetings over, there was a party. It was all smiles and jokes.
It seems to me that they've met you before.
Someone inevitably asked how the talks were going.
No interviews. No press conference. A little bit too early.
But if it's too early today, tomorrow should now bring agreement.
The search for the Soviet cruise missile, which came down in Finland 10 days ago, was called off today because of some of the worst weather in the country for 100 years. Temperatures fell to minus 50 degrees centigrade. There were other record lows in countries right across Europe. Freezing winds from Siberia brought transport to a virtual standstill, and some reports say the cold has already claimed at least 40 lives. At home, snow and ice made driving treacherous. Some towns in East Anglia were cut off for a time, and Essex police said some roads were barely passable. Snowplows were out in force to unblock main roads in the southeast, and motoring organisations had calls from hundreds of stranded drivers. Weathermen say the cold snap is due to last through the week, and more snow is on the way. The Archbishop of Canterbury's special representative, Mr. Terry Waite, has arrived back